Warning, listening to Unleash Your Genius can be good for your health.
Symptoms may include looking and feeling better,
More energy, healthier kids, and increased productivity.
Unleash Your Genius podcast brings you the science, art, and philosophy of health, wellness,
Epigenetics, and lifestyle.
So my guest today is Joanna Whitton, or Jo Whitton. Jo is the author of 2 cookbooks. Well, soon to be 2 cookbooks as of May 2017. Is that right?
March.
Not
long. Yeah.
Not long to go. And Jo's been blogging about food and how food relates to health since 2008. And Jo's cooking, your journey began really early at a young age, helping out your mom and your grandmother in the kitchen, learning how to cook from scratch, pretty full grasp of cooking and cooking healthy as far as what you thought was healthy, I guess you would say. Yeah. And then you started to have a family, and some things changed, or your health started to change a little bit. Is that right?
I always struggled with my health, which is why I was interested in healthy cooking. But I think it was just it just took me a long time to learn what people seem to learn a lot quicker now, but I guess the information wasn't out there as much, and I was just looking through books, I wasn't doing the whole internet search thing. So it took me a long time to get to where I am now. But yeah, I always had struggles with food intolerances and reactions and things. And then as I got older, I had more trouble, and then my kids started having trouble. So yes, it took me on a whole journey of searching how to eat healthy.
Right. So, Jo, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Thank you.
I know I've given you an introduction, but can you tell us a little bit more about you as a professional and as a person?
Sure. So what I do is try to inspire people to live healthier lives, both through recipes and also through just little tips. And on my podcast, which is A Quirky Journey, I go through my story and our family's journey, but also things that I'm learning along the way, interviewing other people like you do that just really have helped me and that have really amazing stories to tell. And I just want to get that message out there that it is possible to have a healthier life than you imagined. I think a lot of people don't realize they're unhealthy until they begin to change their diet and start to see how much better they feel. And we've been through some major things in our own health, and we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But really for me, it started off just as a blog, which I wanted to share my healthy recipes on, and then it grew into a whole business with cookbooks and seminars and podcasts and classes and workshops and coaching and you name it. And so, yeah, that's what I do now. I live in Far North Queensland, and I have 4 kids and a husband, and my kids are all teenagers, so 4 teenagers. And it's really a very family-based business because it's just what we do in our home, and I'm sharing that with the world in the hopes that it will help others who are also trying to eat healthier and have better health.
And you've been your blog started in 2008. Is that the first? That was your first. I guess that was where your journey started as far as all of this. And then one of your cookbooks came after that.
Yes. So my first cookbook came out in May 2014. That's Quirky Cooking, and it was really asked for by my readers, and I kept saying, "Oh, really, a cookbook? Oh, that's a bit scary." And they talked me into it. So, and so Thermomix in Australia published that one, and then everything kind of took off from there. My business really grew after that because I started traveling around Australia doing classes and overseas. And now the second cookbook coming out, there'll be even more traveling. Yeah.
Well, your first book, we got it right away. We got our Thermomix probably 2.5 years ago, and
when the book came out, yeah,
we got it as soon as it came out because we had just gone paleo a couple of years after that, and so that was our really driving force for not only the Thermomix, but your your cookbook is very well dog-eared. I can tell you.
Oh, that's good to hear.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about, I know you mentioned it was a family business that you're in now, and I read a bit about your son Isaac, and some of the struggles and successes that he had was really interesting. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So like you mentioned at the start, I was interested in healthy eating for a long time and was doing the best I could. And as I learned more, I did better. And little by little, we were getting healthier. And I thought we were doing pretty well. My first book came out, and it was mostly whole foods with some grain-free, and it had lots of like dairy-free, allergy-friendly type recipes, because that's how we were eating. None of us coped real great with dairy or gluten, so that was very minimal in our diet. And I would really notice the difference in my kids if they had much dairy, gluten or sugar. So I kept all of those things very low, but we didn't completely take them out. And as the kids got older, I found, especially with teenagers, they're constantly out and about and at everyone else's house, not at yours. So it gets a little bit more difficult to control the diet, as most parents will know. And even, going to grandma's house and, it's okay to have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but the little bits all built up. And, the whole overflowing bucket analogy. One day Isaac's bucket just overflowed big time. So he was the one that was always the most sensitive. And I thought he was doing pretty well. He had his ups and downs. And when he when he wasn't really doing great, I would pull back on the diet and be really strict with dairy-free, even grain-free for a little bit. And then, things would sneak back in, and he'd seem to be okay for a while. And then he'd go downhill again. And so when he was 13, I was very busy. And I think, food at home was good, but, when they were out, things weren't as good. And he suddenly got very, very depressed and anxious. And just overnight, it seemed he began to have terrible phobias and fears and very irrational behaviour, and just not coping with everyday life, didn't want to go anywhere, he just cried all the time. He was very scared of the tiniest things. He was doing all these strange behaviours that we'd never seen before. And I had no idea what to do. And it got to the stage where he couldn't even dress himself. He couldn't, if he went to the toilet, he'd be gone for half an hour and I'd suddenly realise he was gone, and I'd go looking for him, and he was flushing the toilet over and over, or opening and shutting the door. And it was like he was immobilised. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't change his clothes because he was afraid of different colours or different materials, or he couldn't get in and out of the car because of this, you have to put the seatbelt off and on, off and on, off and on. And it went to the stage where I had to feed him with a spoon at 13 years old. And otherwise he would just sit there and cry and couldn't even manage to feed himself. So I knew that something was terribly wrong, but I had no idea what. And I would hold him and talk to him and pray with him and try and counsel him through it. We took him to the doctor. It just seemed to be nobody really had the answers at first. And I just kept thinking in my mind, it's probably something to do with gut health, because he's always struggled with food reactions, intolerances, things like that. So I did start to pull the diet back. But I had a sudden thought of OCD. I don't know what brought it into my mind, but I just suddenly thought, I wonder if it's OCD. And I didn't really know more than what a lot of people know, which is, they're afraid of germs and they wash their hands a lot, which he wasn't really doing. So I'm not sure why I thought of it, but I looked it up and he had every single one of the symptoms, including phobias of certain people and repetitive actions and all the rituals that they do. He had all of those things, and he was quite severe. And so I took him straight to the doctor. By then, none of us were coping. He was just like a mess all the time, and so were we. Weren't getting much sleep. And so I just said to the doctor, look, I think it's OCD. She questioned him and said, yes, that's what it is. And he's got a very severe case of it. And I said, just put him on medication. And I'm not the medication type, but I was at my wit's end. And I thought, I'll work this out, but I've got to get him calmed down because I can't even deal with him. So he went straight onto a small dose of medication, and I went straight to friends of mine that were in the health arena and just said, what do I do? Should I do GAPS? I've heard of this diet where it heals the gut, and I never thought we needed it. It seemed very extreme to me. Right. But I said, is this what we should do? And they were all like, yes, you've got to heal his gut. And when we started to think about it, really everybody in the family was showing signs of poor gut health once I started to look into the symptoms of poor gut health. And I knew that it was something that would help with brain function and also with food intolerances and allergies. And so that was our kick up the backside to really start working on gut health in our family. So we began the GAPS diet, and after very short time, he started to improve. And within 6 months, he could go off the medication. The doctor was amazed at the change. The psychologist said to me, no one improves this quickly. Usually the doctor's doubled the medication by now. But he was ready to go off, and he took a few more months because he was very scared to go off. He was very afraid that he'd go back to what he was. But once he went off it, he had no relapse, and he actually felt clearer in his thinking, and he was just so happy. And now he travels with me and speaks about youth mental health, and he really wants to help other young people going through anxiety and depression and OCD, because he knows what it feels like, and he knows how alone you feel, and that it can be worked with, and you can get off the medication, if you work on all these different areas of especially diet, but we worked on a lot of other things as well, and it just was amazing to see the changes in a short time. Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So the medication that settled things down a little bit in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. It just kind of numbed things a little bit so that he wasn't always sobbing, basically. But he still felt a bit of a zombie, he said. Right. So it's not something you'd want to be on all your life if possible. I don't know. There's different ways of thinking about it. At the time, it was just so desperate that we did it.
Yeah.
But knowing what I do now, I might have tried just diet at first and seen how it really depends on personal preference, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
So changing his diet, like a teenager, a 13-year-old, I don't know, at the best of times, it's pretty hard to, have them give stuff up and veggies and all of that stuff. It just seems like a constant struggle. Was that the case with you?
It wasn't with Isaac, because he's very much a researcher. So when he was really bad, I remember one day he was laying on the floor just sobbing, and I was desperately searching on the internet for things to encourage him, other people's stories and stuff, and I started reading him some stories of people who'd gotten well from OCD, and he just stopped crying. He listened to me, and then he suddenly just jumped up off the floor and said, "You mean people get well from this?" And I said, "Yeah, you can recover from this. People get well." And that was like it flicked a switch in his brain, and then he wanted to research what to do. And so he took it on himself to really look into things. And so he studied the GAPS diet, and he knew what foods he could have at what stages. He knew it better than I did. He just got right onto it as part of the OCD.
Right.
He was determined to do it right.
Yeah.
And because he knew that it could help, he was determined to stick to it. So I never had any trouble with him cheating on the diet or anything, because he was so determined to get well.
Right.
With the other kids, they were a bit more unhappy at the start, because they were like, "What? No bread?" But once they understood how it could help their brother, then they wanted to do it as well, just because, like I said, we all weren't coping and we all wanted him to be well, because it was very hard on the family. But once we got into it, everyone agreed that the food actually wasn't that bad, and it wasn't as hard as we thought. So yeah, it was lovely once we got into it.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds hard at the beginning, especially with a bunch of teenagers.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's in your head though, because you think, oh my goodness, I can't have this, 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 and this. But if you focus on what you can have, it's very delicious food. It's not that, it's not like a diet where you can't have any fats and you can't have any, I don't know, it's very yummy food. And we'd have the kids' friends come over and they'd say, oh, this is really yummy. I wish we ate like this.
Oh, nice. That helps.
Yeah, but I think it's harder for little kids that don't like vegetables. That is quite difficult the first couple of weeks, but my kids were already good at eating veggies, so that wasn't a problem.
Right. Yeah, our kids were the same until they went to school, at least until my youngest turned just about now. She started to see other kids' lunch boxes.
We homeschool, so we didn't have that problem.
I know. I was thinking about that this morning. I was like, you had that aspect covered, but it's a lot harder if they're at school. Yeah. Do you help people, or do you work with people that obviously aren't so fortunate to homeschool? And
all the time.
Can you, for the parents that are listening, can you give us like your 3 top tips of, what they might plan on doing to get their toddler or even maybe teenagers to embrace that more? Or well, even though our kids weren't going to school, they were going to sports and other people's houses and parties and all of that. So it is similar in that there was always the temptations there. But at home, what I said right from the start, and this is what I really recommend parents do, is just say, look, I'm the one cooking the meals, so anything that I cook is going to be just, I'm only going to buy the food that I want you to eat, and I'm only going to cook that food. I'm not going to buy any of those extra things. Get rid of all the foods out of the house that you don't want them eating. Just get rid of them and only have real food in the house. And then, I said to my kids, if you want anything else, because at first they were like, no, we don't want to do this. The other kids were sort of not wanting to do it. And I said, if you want anything else, you have to go earn the money to buy it. You have to go to the grocery store and buy it. And none of them had licenses. And you have to cook it. And then you can have it. And then they just all gave up. And even my husband, I said the same thing to, because he wasn't really on board at first. And so he had a few things he'd sneak home and he'd just keep them in a cupboard. And I would say, just kids, that's dad's stuff. And they understood. But what I would recommend to parents, just get rid of the stuff out of the house that you don't want them to have and refuse to buy it. I mean, you've got to be in charge here when it's something as important as your kids' health. And just be, tough love. Another thing is keep it really simple. Don't overload yourself with heaps of baking of special things with all different, ingredients so that they can have something that's exactly what they used to have but made with something else. You know how you can get really... I find all that paleo baking and all of that can get quite overwhelming if you get too much into that, and people suddenly feel it's all too hard. But if you have really simple food, just as close to nature as possible, and for snacks have things like fruit and nuts and maybe some homemade custard or yogurt or something like that, just really, really basic foods. They very quickly get used to that and just don't have the packet foods. Just keep it simple and save the baking for like a special occasion. So if you're going to a party and you need to take something, or you're going on a picnic or something like that, just save it for special. Don't have it every day. And the other thing I would say is just really reduce the sugars. So try to focus on savoury snacks, a full meal at every meal, breakfast, lunch and dinner, because that will cut down the snacking immensely. Just reduce the sugars and raise the good fats, and it keeps everyone full a lot longer, and it really reduces the snacking. Right. Yeah. Hope that helps. Absolutely. And I think another thing that I came upon that would probably help is your Quirky Cooking for Gut Health. You've put like an entire program together to help people from like cooking videos to shopping. Can you tell us about that program?
Sure. So I did get so many questions along the way from people saying, I want to do that too, but it's all too hard. It's all too overwhelming. I don't know what to cook. And one of my friends said, I did GAPS for 6 months and pretty much every day for 6 months she had chicken and pumpkin soup. And I'm just like, why? She goes, well, that's the only thing I knew I could eat. I'm like, that's ridiculous. I said, there's so many, like when you look at the allowed food list, there's so many different vegetables. We actually started eating things that we'd never really bothered eating before. We expanded our diet because we started looking for different vegetables that we could have that we didn't usually buy.
Right.
And looking for different meats and trying different cuisines, I think, just trying different things to be able to make with meat and veggies so it would be different. So what I did was wrote down my recipes and ideas and put them into meal plans so that there's a meal plan for each stage of intro gaps, and made a recipe book for each meal plan, an ebook. And I did cooking videos and all sorts of stuff. So that's all online in my Quirky Cooking for Gut Health program. And it's the kind of thing that you just buy it and then you've got it for life. It's not a program where you've got to get it done in a certain amount of time, because you can't. It's something that, one family will take 3 months to go through intro, another will take a year. It really is very individual and you have to tweak it to suit your body. So we have an online support group, a Facebook closed support group, which we have a GAPS coach and GAPS practitioner in there. And they come in and do a question and answer session each week to help people. And we really recommend that people get professional help to go through it properly, especially if they've got some difficult situations with their family's health. But it's been a big help to a lot of people. We've got over 2,000 users in the program now.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And it's on, they can find it quirkycooking.com.au. Is that where
Yeah, you could go there, or gaps.quirkycooking.com.au.
Okay.
That's easy. Yeah.
So, Joe, for you yourself, what kind of struggles did you have any struggles, changing? Was there anything you had to give up, or
when I first started eating healthy, I think I didn't understand the importance of reducing the sugars. That took me a long time to get my head around for some reason. I think, like I said, I started pretty early before there was a lot of information out there, and it wasn't, nobody said too much about the sugars. My naturopath did. He kept saying, your daughter's going to have a lot of trouble with sugar if you don't reduce the sugars. She's like borderline candida. And she ended up with candida and terrible fillings in her teeth and all sorts of things, because I was thinking I was doing the right thing by giving the kids, when they were tiny, giving them plenty of fruit juice and dried fruit and homemade baking. But it was, I made it myself. It had to be okay.
Right.
And so I overdid it with the sugars when the kids were little, and I didn't realise, but I was quite addicted to sugars as well. So even though I went away from white sugar and that kind of thing quite early, it was still a very high carb, high sugar diet, just with the natural sweeteners. And that's why I often say to people, just like when you want to start eating healthy, just stop having the breads and baking for a while and really to having meat and vegetables and broths and nuts and seeds and things like that, and then bring in a tiny bit of sweets. So something that I really struggled with. And even now, I try to keep sugars and starches very low because I find it messes with my blood sugar levels. The only sweets I had was some homemade things that were very low in natural sugar. Made me made me crave dessert and sweets after dinner, so I have to pull right back and be very careful with that. So that's probably my main struggle, is keeping the sugars low. That'd be what it would be. Right.
So you broke up a little bit there. You increased your proteins and your fats, and
yes.
So what about and desserts?
Yeah, just keeping them really low. I don't really have a lot of desserts now. I keep it for special and try not to make it an everyday thing. I was raised in a family where mum cooked and baked all the time, and there was always dessert after dinner.
Right.
So that's something that I had to learn to not do.
There's a lot of rituals and emotional connection to those foods.
There is, definitely.
Do you exercise? Are you a big exerciser?
Yeah, I'm not a big exerciser. I wouldn't say I was a big one. I do love, my favourite thing is just to get out into nature. It's like exercise and therapy at the same time.
Yeah.
We live in a really beautiful part of Australia with a lot of waterfalls and lakes and mountains, and we live on the edge of a very small town of 1,000 people, rolling green hills and volcanic craters everywhere. So we like going climbing through creeks and waterfalls and just really enjoying being outside, going for walks, things like that. I do also do a little bit of Pilates and bar workouts, so that's something that I love to do, and I'm trying to do more of that this year. I've got a friend who's just started, she's a Pilates instructor now, and so she's coming over once a week and doing Pilates with me. So that's the kind of exercise I like, pretty gentle,
Nice.
Natural movement, body weight type exercises.
Yep. Do you have a morning routine or anything that you do to start your day?
I'm pretty flexible. I love my time in the morning, so I get up pretty early because I like the quietness before all the kids get up. So it could be anywhere between 5:30 and 6:30 I'll get up, and I'll quite often just make a cuppa and sit on the couch with my dog and read and think and write, and sometimes I'll answer. I get a lot of emails from people going through major struggles with their kids' health and stuff, and that's often the time I'll answer something like that because it's quiet and I can think, and it's kind of my thinking time. And I also like to cook early in the morning, so I'll often make breakfast and lunch before the kids even get up, or around the time they're getting up, because I'm prepared for the day. Because we have main meals every meal, you sort of got to be always on top of it.
Right.
So, yeah, my mornings I start off slow, and then once I start cooking, it will speed up.
So how do you?
I don't get exercise done in the morning. I try, but it's just too much to do in the morning. It's usually afternoon.
Right. And you must be organized with your time. I mean, with 4 teenagers, and you're writing the book, and you've got the programs. You'd be pretty organized with your time.
I used to be much more structured, and as you get more kids and more busy, I've actually gotten less structured and more flexible, but I have a lot of help now. So my kids are really great with helping. They all have their own jobs that they do in the home. I don't do any of the washing. I don't do the floors. I don't do the bathroom, toilet. I don't do the rubbish or things like that. My kids do all of that. And then we also, all help out in the kitchen. I do most of the cooking, but they do help. And I also have an assistant now because when I'm writing and working and traveling, I really need someone at home to help with the cooking, and also to help with recipe development. So I have someone that comes 3 days a week as well.
Okay.
But that's just been the last year or two that I've had that, which is a very big help.
So I imagine you would need that. Plus, having 4 teenagers, you could,
never stop eating. Oh. And when you make everything yourself, it's kind of time-consuming.
Right. You're not thinking about the money; you're thinking about how much time you're putting into it.
Yeah, that's right.
So I know we're running out of time, Joe. Can you? I just want to talk about some of the things that you're working on now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about your new book?
Sure. So a friend of mine he's a chef and he's a food writer, Fuad Kassab. We've been friends for years. He was a food blogger as well, and we connected on a mutual hate for margarine, and we decided to write a cookbook together, and we began in February, and we've just finished, and it's all gone off to the printer, and that'll be out, like we said, in March, and it really talks you through the basics of healthy living as well as healthy eating. So it goes through what our stories are and the journeys we've been on to heal, because he was very sick and obese and skin issues and everything, and basically a paleo, low-carb, sort of high-fat diet helped him get well. And then mine was the other way. I was very underweight and very sick, and that same kind of diet helped me to heal and come to a balanced weight. And I think it's really good for people to see it from both sides, because it's when you eat the right way and you lower the stresses and the toxins and, think about things like sleep and good water and things like that, it just makes such a difference, and your body will balance out to where it should be. And so that's what we talk about in the book, and we have both contributed recipes that are family favourites and that have helped in our healing journey, and with little stories, and just really, it's just a really beautiful book, I must say. It's about 287 pages, and it's a big hardcover book. It's just beautiful with lots of lovely photos. We've really put our hearts into it, so we're very excited. And we do, it's called Life Changing Food, and we do seminars and classes and workshops around that as well, the Life Changing Food workshops. So they'll be all around Australia this year. So that'll be fun.
Looking forward to that. Where can we find out about those?
The best place is just to subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do on my blog, Quirky Cooking. Yep. And then you'll find out about any classes in your area that way. We do also put them up on Facebook and on the blog and stuff, but sometimes people miss that. So it's best to keep an eye on a newsletter, then you know.
Are you still with Thermomix?
No, I haven't worked for Thermomix for a couple of years. So I often do classes with them, and I still love my Thermomix. And so we work together with consultants sometimes to run workshops and classes. But I'm on my own now as a business, because I just got way too busy to be selling Thermomixes as well. Right. So yeah, I stopped that a couple of years ago.
Okay. And the new cookbook it has Thermomix recipes and non-Thermomix?
Yeah, because we really wanted to make sure that it was, available to anyone, whether they had a Thermomix or not. Both of us use the Thermomix a lot, but we also use conventional methods for a lot of things. So we just wrote the recipes as much as possible with both methods, so that anyone could use it.
Right. Any last thoughts or words of advice?
Probably have a listen to our podcast. So Fuad and I have the podcast, A Quirky Journey, and I think a lot of the questions that people ask us are really answered on there, because we talk about just everyday stuff and everyday people's stories, just like you do, because I think that's how I've learnt so much, is by talking to people, and the more you ask, the more you learn. Yeah. So get out there and listen to podcasts, read as much as you can. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah.
The best part about doing a podcast is being able to talk to people like you, and it's been.
Oh, I love it.
I know it's a lot of work, but man, it's definitely it's definitely pays off.
Yeah, you meet some great people and hear some amazing stories.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, Joe, for sharing your story today. I'll have links to all of your information and stuff, so everybody will be able to find you and get a hold of you. And just a big thank you for your time today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to Unleash Your Genius with your host, Dr. Brian Peterson. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit unleashyourgenius.com. We'll catch you next time.
Hey, what's up? I hope you guys liked this episode, and if you did, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, and most importantly, give us a review and give us a 5-star rating too, please. All right, see ya. Oh, wait, and don't forget www.unleashyourgenius.com. Come check us out.